The next amendment is by Marvin Pendarvis, Sr., number 66.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, when I was up early, I told you I was getting ready to talk about an issue that's important to many South Carolinians, and that's affordable housing. And this amendment that I have before you today really tackles an issue, and I hope that you hear me out, because I think if you listen and you glean what I'm trying to say, we can get in a bipartisan effort to get this amendment passed. As many of you probably know, Princeton University conducted a study several years ago trying to analyze evictions across the entire country. And what that study found was that South Carolina had two states that led the nation in eviction rates. North Charleston was number 1, and here in Richland County, Columbia was number 8. And so what that said to me is, as a state, if we've got two of the cities that are in the top 10 that boast high eviction rates, we've got a problem. When 16.5 out of 100 renters are evicted in North Charleston, and not many are far behind here in Richland County. And so I got to looking into the issue a little bit more, Micah Caskey, and what I learned was, generally, when these tenants were going into court, they were going pro se. They were going unrepresented. And they were going up against landlords that typically had attorneys. And what studies have showed is that landlords have been represented by attorneys at a rate of 6 to 1. So not every tenant is unrepresented. In fact, in my own law practice, I've defended many or represented many tenants in eviction court. But at a rate of 6 to 1, we've got landlords that typically outnumber attorneys when it comes to representation. And these numbers show that having an attorney in an eviction case increases a family's chance of avoiding eviction and ultimately avoiding homelessness. Now, the South Carolina Housing Authority conducted a study recently in their needs assessment. And I sit on the oversight committee, and over the summer we took testimony from them, getting information. And what they presented to us was some information on the impact that evictions have in South Carolina. And I'll just read out some statistics for you just to paint the picture a little clearer. For every 1,000 renter households, 187 received a notice and 89 were forcibly removed. Overall, there were about 86,682 evictions filed in 2016. 41,000 were completed. 25% of South Carolinians, or the renters, spend more than half of their income on rent. And so what does that mean if they're spending more than half of their income on rent? That has an impact on a state of about $8.4 billion. So that what they call shelter poverty prevents families from getting things like food, clothing, and transportation, the basic necessities. And so what this amendment does, and as a result of this, the Supreme Court at the lead of Chief Justice Beatty basically said, we're going to commission a pilot program in Charleston County. They commissioned it last May, where in Charleston County, the magistrate courts, there are 3 designated courts that are working with pro bono agencies that are providing services to tenants who are being evicted, because they recognize that not many of them are getting the information that they need. And what this amendment does is essentially says, okay, we recognize the efforts that you're doing in Charleston County, because the pilot program is essentially going to give us data that's going to lead to us being able to compile that across the state and show why we need this. And so I'm hoping that what we can do is get an attorney. And I'll tell you from a personal story. And I grew up in North Charleston. And I was my family growing up in the early 1990s, we were the subject and the victims of many evictions. And it's not easy. And it's not fun when you're in 5th grade at North Charleston Elementary School and you go home and you're excited about the good grades that you made on your report card, and your mama has to tell you that the landlord put us out because she wasn't able to afford the $700 rent, and the things that impact that can have on you as a child. It can be devastating. It's hard to overcome, and so many families grapple with that and deal with that on a day-to-day basis. And I just ask that you put yourselves in these family shoes, because that was me. I walk those shoes. This isn't a story. It's a reality that many live. And we have an opportunity to do something about it that is affecting so many people across the country. And unfortunately, as a state, we haven't taken the initiative to do something about it. But I'm thankful that our Supreme Court saw fit to conduct and issue this pilot program in Charleston County. And hopefully it gives us the information that we need so we can come up with a comprehensive approach. Because I truly believe, just like we have, Mr. Speaker, can I get a little bit of order? Just a little bit, not too much, just a little bit of order. I truly believe that if you give, just like we do with the public defender systems and those indigent defendants who've been charged with crimes, people who are indigent and unable to afford an attorney, because if you're being evicted, then typically you're in a position right there where your family is financially unable to afford to get by. And so all this is just putting them on a level playing field, giving them the opportunity. You know, I spoke with some people back in Charleston. All they're looking for is to be able to have an attorney, pay them $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, something below $100,000. Not going to have a dramatic impact on our state, but an opportunity to level the playing field. We got an opportunity to get this right. And I'm hoping that you all will see fit that this is something that we can do. I think the time is now. I think the time is past due. And I'm hoping that you all will see fit to join me in this effort to make sure that we're on the same level playing field and that we're on the right side. Evictions are serious. They affect families in many ways. And thankfully, and by the grace of God, a loving mother and a supportive family, I was able to overcome those circumstances, graduate second in my class in high school, go on to University of South Carolina, graduate with honors, and go on to law school. But not every family is in that position. And unfortunately, we have to be able to do something about it. I believe we're the gatekeepers, and if we don't, we're going to look back and say, what are we doing for the least of these, Ms. Carpenter? What are we doing for the people that are unable to do for themselves? Now, I know there may be many questions. You may ask where this money is coming from. And the truth is, many of you probably haven't been impacted by evictions. And so you may just turn a blind eye. You may say it doesn't impact me. But what affects us in Charleston County affects those in Greenwood, in Greenville, and Rock Hill. I have to care about my neighbor and his and her well-being and what's important to his and her family because it impacts us as an entire state. We have an obligation to make sure we're doing the right things to put ourselves and our citizens in the right position to succeed. And evictions and combating them in a realistic way and a meaningful way will lead us in the right direction. And with that, I'll take any questions, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Pendarvis, Ms. Kimmons has a question. Ms. Kimmons recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Pendarvis, for taking my question. Would you agree with me that the Public Defender's Office is primarily designed to deal with indigent criminal defendants?
You said, would I agree that the Public Defender's Office is what now?
Primarily deals with indigent criminal defendants.
I would say that it is designed to deal with indigent defendants, correct, yes.
Criminal defendants?
Yes.
And would you agree with me that South Carolina Legal Aid already provides this service and that they represent defendants in eviction actions?
So I agree with you, but here's the issue, Ms. Kimmons, and I'm glad you brought that point up, and I alluded to it in my earlier comments. So I've talked with Legal Aid, and I was part of the task force that led to us being able to get the Supreme Court to authorize a pilot program in Charleston County. And Legal Aid is strapped. You know, it's based off of what those volunteer attorneys there are able to do. And essentially all this does is give us a dedicated person. Legal Aid does more than just evictions, wouldn't you agree? Legal Aid, they certainly help out when possible. And I've been referred cases to Legal Aid that I've taken pro bono simply because they're not able to manage the caseload to take on that. So all I'm saying is let's not put the burden exclusively on Legal Aid because they've got an array of issues they've got to deal with. If we're going to be serious about this, let's look at some of the cities that are being instrumental. Let's look at Virginia. Let's look at some of the states that are similarly situated to South Carolina that has taken this head on. You know, I visited Virginia. I spoke with their legislature, and they talked about this last year. They recognized we've got Richmond, Virginia, which was number 2 in the country in eviction rates. They said they knew, like many states above that before us knew, if we do something about this and we, one, establish an eviction court, and 2, ensure that people who are facing evictions have right and access to representation. representation that's properly funded, not simply relying on legal aid. Now, some of them may use legal aid, but here in South Carolina, I think it's an opportunity for us to get it right and do it with the resources that we have.
And would you agree with me that Charleston County has one of the largest South Carolina legal aid offices in the state?
I completely agree with you, but I'm telling you what I know, Mandy.
Okay.
I'm telling you.
And I'm having a hard time understanding why this money has been allocated to the Public Defender's Office and not to South Carolina Legal Aid for an attorney to specifically address evictions with South Carolina Legal Aid.
I think the reason why we chose the Public Defender's Office is because it's an opportunity to streamline it countywide and be able to house it in a place that already deals with indigent defendants, even though those may be criminal defense. At the end of the day, we've got to make sure that we are giving the people who are going to these courts the best opportunity to be able to be successful, at least be on a level playing field. If you think it's differently, I certainly encourage you to offer an amendment that puts it in legal aid or wherever you see fit. But I think for this, it's an opportunity for us to get it right. I'm fine with it being, and I'll certainly...
Ms. Pendarvis, I'm sorry to interrupt. Yes, your first 10 minutes. You want your second, sir?
I'll take the second.
Ms. Pendarvis requests a second 10 minutes.
I get what you're saying, Ms. Kimmons, but the reality is in my opinion, the Defender's Office is best suited to take this on for what South Carolinians face, particularly what Charlestonians face. I've talked with Legal Aid. I've talked with Charleston Legal Access. I've talked with 180 Place. There are a number of pro bono agencies that are down in Charleston County that are doing this work, and they do a tremendous job, but they also know that they don't have the adequate resources to do it fully, and being able to do this and at least house in an agency that already does indigent defense, I think it makes sense. It just makes the best sense. But certainly, like I said, if you feel like it's best suited somewhere else, then let's work together on the bill that accomplish that.
Thank you for taking my question.
As always, thank you.
Mr. Jeff Johnson recognized for a question.
Mr. Johnson, where you at?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm over here. Got a quick question for you. So what you're trying to do is have public defenders start representing tenants in a private cause of action of eviction. Is that right?
Well, let's keep the issues where they are.
It's a yes or no, and then explain it. Isn't that right?
No.
No? Okay. Now tell me why.
All right. Well, so here's the explanation, Mr. Johnson, okay? What I want us to remember, General Assembly, this is a pilot program. This is not across the entire state of South Carolina, okay? We're not going to be having public defenders across all the 16 public defenders or the other 15 public defenders' offices doing this. This is an opportunity for us to compile the data in order for us to analyze it and say, okay, how are evictions affecting...
But that's not my question. My question was, isn't an eviction process a private cause of action?
Yes, it is. By a private landlord, it is a private cause of action. That's correct.
And you're asking for this body to require public defenders who are paid by taxpayers, working people in the state of South Carolina, actually funding these attorneys to represent these tenants in a private cause of action. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, public defenders are traditionally in South Carolina only for criminal defense. Isn't that right? Representation?
Traditionally, yes.
Exactly. This will be the first time this will have ever been done in the state of South Carolina. Isn't that right?
I think, but again, remember what I said at the beginning, Mr. Johnson. It's a pilot program. So, yes, it would be doing exactly that. We would be having public defenders in South Carolina represent tenants exclusively facing evictions. But what it does is it gives us the opportunity to compile that data, take a look at it in conjunction with the pilot program that the Supreme Court already initiated in Charleston and say, what can we do to come up with a comprehensive approach? If we feel like it's better suited somewhere else, then let's do that. But we've got to start somewhere, Mr. Johnson.
I understand and appreciate what you want to accomplish, which is to use this mechanism as a way of funding to collect data. I understand that. I appreciate what you're trying to do. But my next question is, if you do this, won't it create a bigger backlog for public defenders in Charleston County?
I don't see how.
Is there a backlog already of cases in the public defender's office? In other words, they need more attorneys.
Right.
Exactly. So how many cases as far as representing tenants will be added to the Charleston County roster?
So certainly it would, I get what you're saying, and certainly there would be more.
And you may not know. Do you know?
No, I don't know the exact number of cases. No, I mean, there's a significant backlog. Don't get me wrong about that. What I think is what it'll do is, again, they will be handling exclusively, just like in the public defender's office, you've got dedicated defenders who deal with, let's say, DUIs, or you've got people who deal with certain types of offenses that you may commit. Essentially, all this is saying, let's go ahead and get someone that deals with evictions. We've already got a system in place with the magistrates in Charleston County that are hearing these cases. They deal with them on certain days of the week out of the month. Let's put them in these places and they deal with them. And honestly, I think it's an opportunity for it to ease the caseload. And I think it actually works to counter your point, to be able to lessen the burden on the entire office, because you at least have someone that they hire. It doesn't have to be within. That's why I'm asking this money to go to hire someone that's not already on staff to be able to deal with these evictions. I think it's not, it might be unique to South Carolina, but it's not a unique concept nationwide. I've studied this issue, Mr. Johnson. I wouldn't have come to this body ignorant. I wouldn't have come at it haphazardly. I assure you, I've traveled to places. I've been to Birmingham. I've been to Maryland. I've been to Virginia. I've talked to people. I've continued to engage in this issue because it's personal. It's important to the citizens of South Carolina. And if this body is not willing to do that, then let's not do that. Okay? If that's what this body is willing, if that's what the will of this body is, then that's what the will of this body is. But I'm telling you, their lives at stake. There are too many people that are dealing with this issue for us to continue to be silent about it.
And I understand your concerns. I do, and I appreciate those. My concern, though, is when you have a budget, you only have a certain amount of money and you allocate it for certain things. And this
I understand that, Mr.
already
Johnson.
allocated for public defenders. How much is it going to take to fund this program that you're saying that that you want to have done through this?
So it's not a program, Mr. Johnson. It's in conjunction with what the Supreme Court already has done. And I'll be more than glad to have a conversation with you after this and talk about the Supreme Court order that basically has authorized the pilot program in Charleston County in conjunction with the legal aid and the Charleston Legal Access and all the pro bono agencies and the court system. All this is essentially saying, let's put an attorney in Charleston County within the public defender's office to be able to defend and handle these eviction cases. That's all it is.
I'm trying to figure it out. Are you saying the Supreme Court order provides that the public defender's office?
No. I'm saying it's in conjunction with. So all the Supreme Court order does.
I didn't think it did. So I think you're the one that's wanting to do that, right?
I'm sorry?
You're the one who wants to add the public defense.
That's correct. That's correct.
I understand.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. So what the Supreme Court order does is basically says, hey, collect this data, all of y'all come together, represent these tenants, right?
It acknowledges the issue, it wants us to collect this data, and it makes sure that we're working to make sure that we try to do everything that we can to reduce evictions.
Did you know my concern with this bill, or should I say that this amendment is that it expands government where it shouldn't be expanded?
Well, I think if we look at the impact that evictions have on the entire state, it's already impacting government, because if we look at the money that it's costing us, say $8.4 billion it costs the state of South Carolina to deal with people who are facing eviction and eventually dealing with the housing crisis. We're going to have to pay for that somehow. Let's address it on the front end. Let's take a proactive approach instead of coming here 2 and 3 years later when we realize, you know what, we should have done something about it then, and then all of a sudden we're allocating and dedicating money to it after the fact. That's all I'm saying. Let's not be late to the game here, Mr. Johnson.
Did you know another concern that I have with this amendment is there are people I know in Horry County in the past, that my understanding, who have been charged with a crime and they're sitting in jail, and they are waiting to speak to their public defender. The public defenders don't have time with their caseload.
Well, we can't continue to say that we don't have time to deal with the issues that are important to South Carolinians. We keep saying that. We don't have time. We don't have money. We don't have resources. Just say you don't want to do it. Just keep it 100. Just say you don't want to do it.
That whenever I was on oversight and we were looking at indigent defense, one of the problems is the backlog that there is.
I understand that, Mr. Johnson. Listen, you and I both practice law. I've done criminal defense. I know there's a backlog. I am well aware.
My point is, and you keep talking while I'm talking, and I understand that. You're passionate about this.
I understand that, but I get my points out and you're talking too, so I think it's both ways.
But when those people are in jail, we want to make sure that they get the representation timely and speedy that they should.
Yes.
So for those reasons, I cannot support this amendment.
I completely understand that.
Ms. Robinson's recognized for a question.
Senator Pendarvis,
Ms.
I
Robinson
think
Simpson.
this is a wonderful effort, and I fully 100% support it. I think it's going to do so much to reduce evictions and to give poor people in that Charleston area a fighting chance. So I do support it. Thank you so much for bringing it to us.
Thank you.